this year. We're live.
Okay, Ben Novogroski for the Office of Legislative Counsel. Before the committee today is S14. Right now, draft 3.1. There's also draft 3.2. Those drafts differ only in the author of the report. Otherwise, I'll just go through the changes that are consistent between the two. So initially, the report has now changed from an annual report to one due on November 15th, 2023, and every 2 years thereafter. This will sunset in 26, so there will only be 2 reports provided. And the Secretary of Human Services is still the author of the report. There is also a request to incorporate language from S27 regarding race data collection for all pretrial detainees held in Vermont correctional facilities. So this language is now reflected on page 4, lines 12 through 14, to read that pretrial detainees held in Vermont correctional facilities, including any applicable charge code and whether the offense is considered violent. That's consistent with the other data points contained in the report. And then this would be subject to the breakdown of data indicators to include race, gender, age, education, literacy rates, and substance use.
Hey, do we have copies of this?
Oh, God, I do have copies. I'm sorry. Which one is it? 3-1?
3-1.
Okay.
But you could get 3-2.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Too much going on.
Yeah.
Okay, we're now on page.
4, the middle of page
I'll
4.
post it right now. I have a couple extra copies of this one.
But moving on from page 4, the only other changes are confined to the end, which is now new section 3, which is the sunset of the report that I previously mentioned. It would be repealed on July 1, 2026. So the only reports that would be due would be one on November 15th, 2023, and another on November 15th, 2025. And the other change is that it's to the effective date. The date or the act would be effective on passage rather than July 1, to provide a little bit more time to get started on everything in the bill. And then 3.2, the only difference between that is the Office of Legislative Counsel would be the author of the report. However, after conferring with Director Jen Carby, I would just flag for the committee that this is well outside of what we do. This is really a data collection and analysis bill. We are a law firm for the legislature to draft bills and do research related to those bills.
Senator.
My question, I don't, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
My question, I don't know that it is actually for Ben, but is about the change. Why are we sunsetting this report?
Well, to give it sort of a point in time to revisit, I believe is sort of the impetus is that some of the concerns that have been raised by the stakeholders is capacity, resources, funds. I think having a sunset would force the legislature to come and revisit to see if those concerns can be more adequately addressed, and also what data is available and what is not available, which is another concern that has been, I think, raised by some of the stakeholders in this is there's a lot of information that this report requires to be collected that either does not exist currently, or the systems are so antiquated the collectability would be quite difficult.
Okay.
And adding to that, I noticed this year a number of reports that came to Judiciary. I mean, it was huge. And most of them I didn't really need to view. And a few years ago, Senator White did a report on reports, trying to determine what reports were still needed. And we have government agencies doing all kinds of reports that nobody reads. And so the idea here was, this is important. We should, now we could do, every 2 years for 6 years or something like that. I just think there needs to be an end date so that we don't keep this up if nobody wants to read it anymore.
I certainly appreciate that, and I'm remembering many of our sunset conversations from last year in the House, but we can we can extend it at that point. I think this information coming from this report is really critically important to revamping and rebuilding a more restorative criminal justice system. So I don't want to see us do it once and say, look, we're done.
Yeah, no, 2 or 3 or 4 is certainly acceptable, just wanted to have an ending. Senator.
Just listening between the lines here, and the and on page 2 about including alleged counsel in the report here. Is that something that you don't think should happen, or can you not have it?
Well, the policy decision is up to you. I would just say that, or reiterate that it's really outside of what we do, and we are a staff of 18 attorneys. That when this report would be due, granted it's November, but it's still during when things are ramping up to the session when it comes to drafting requests and other.
If we refer to it rather than as a report, and it was done by the Agency of Human Services or some other governmental group, and asked for suggested legislation and just the facts without the, I wonder if, yes.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So it could be done by the agency wants to speak up, or by the sentencing commission.
I do know I spoke to Judge Zone, and he responded and said that the sentencing commission can do this, but I think that there might be similar concerns there as well. And after speaking with my colleague, Ms. Livingston, I know she expressed similar concerns about exactly what the report requires, the level of data, and then also I think some capacity issues as well.
Can we hear from?
Yeah, I just was wondering at sort of the close of our last meeting, the idea of actually giving this to a working group came up, and I'm just wondering where we landed on that.
I think the language, that not to steal my colleague's thunder too much, but I think what the stakeholders, when they got together, they came up with some new language, which I think she's going to speak to. But it's different than I think the working group proposal that was originally discussed a couple of days ago.
Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shayla Livingston. I'm the policy director for the Agency of Human Services. I apologize, I'm not there in person. It was sleeting sideways here, so I decided to stay home. But I wanted to thank the committee first for your focus on this issue. This is definitely something that the agency is very interested in and wants to support this work. So I want to start with that to be really clear that we support the concept as a whole. I have with me today my colleague Jessica, and she works for the Department of Corrections, which holds some of, not all of, the data listed here. And we can go through for the committee today and detail what we do and don't have, but we can also hold that for later if that's more helpful. I did want to start by just addressing the broader concerns that Ben has raised and pointed out.
The problem is I had scheduled other people at a different topic at 10:45.
Understood, Senator.
Yeah.
So I'll be fast and just explain the overall.
Well,
So-
do we have a copy of that? Maggie's gonna hand out draft, this one.
Should I post it as well?
Yeah, you might as well, although if we can read it.
So our main recommendation is that the different parties that you are requesting data from, because it is not all within the Agency of Human Services, that those parties come and present as a whole, either to your, and the timing, we're open to timing conversations, either to Joint Justice Oversight if it's off session, or to your committee again next year with these data. We at the agency are also happy to come and present the DOC data that we already have this year, later this spring, whenever it's convenient for the committee. We don't have some of the data, and as not being the owners of that data, we could convene a working group. That working group would still need to be staffed. And I think it might be more valuable to inform the committee around what is and isn't available and what would need to be developed or not, to have some sort of report in the future, to have those different parties that hold those data come in and explain that individually and on their own terms, instead of me, because I know we say the Agency of Human Services, but you're looking at the person who would author this report, instead of me trying to collect and aggregate that in some fashion. The other really, I think, critical thing here is, while we do have a lot of these data and we publish them on our website, we want to make sure that we keep it in those formats, because those formats were determined and decided by the department as a resource for the stakeholders who use these data on a regular basis. So aggregating them into one specific report versus holding them in those different places, we just have some concerns about that, and otherwise we're duplicating our work. So again, an oral report and a presentation to you all would resolve that issue. The last thing I just want to make really clear is we really, again, appreciate the intent behind F. And I heard earlier the sentiment of, we want an evaluation of our criminal justice. You know, is this reinvestment? Is this work working? And I just want to remind the committee that we at DOC, at the Agency of Human Services, you know, we hold DOC, but we don't hold the rest of these programs and the rest of the system that feeds into criminal justice and criminal justice reform. So I want to make sure that we are meeting the expectation the committee has and are clear about what we are and are not able to do. We cannot give you an evaluation of justice reinvestment 2 from a, like, does it have a causal relationship or, you know, a scientifically proven outcome. And there's many of the data in there that we don't have today. So that section F, we just really want to make sure the committee knows, if we leave it as is, we'll just be coming back to say, we can tell you how much we're spending and we can tell you the data we have, but we will not be able to provide whether or not it is sort of causally effective in that manner. I also wanted to just let this committee know that we would love to come in and testify in the future with the Agency of Human Services data director, and she can tell the committee more about what the agency is doing as a whole to integrate our data systems so that we can do more of this cross-agency and cross-departmental work. It won't solve all of the problems that you're looking to solve with data in this report, but it is a really intensive project that's long-term. It's going to cost a lot of money, but we are working on that separately, and we'd be excited to tell you more about that. And the last thing I'll say, and then we can either explain more about the data or save it for another day, is that we did ask for funding and the legislature approved it to begin to upgrade our OMS system. And so that will go into effect, you know, over the next few years. We will be coming back for more there.
Okay, here's what I'm going to suggest. I want to run this by the Justice Center. Have then contact them and ask them if they're available Tuesday or Wednesday, 28th of February or the 1st of March. And we come back to S14 at that point. We now have 3 different versions of the report. I will only explain that it's important to us to have the report before January 15th in terms of any legislation that might be necessary. So that's the reason we put, I think, November in one. So
we prefer November.
And that first week of March or the end of February, if you could get together and talk about some of that. And I also will ask you why, you know, not today, but why you wouldn't know the average number of beds available in your correction system. I noticed
Jessica can answer that if you'd like.
So those are some of the questions that I would have, that you say you don't have that data. I would hope you'd know how many beds were available. Be like asking a hospital how many beds they have. Getting told we don't know. So anyway, I just want to clarify, we definitely do know. We can explain what we meant,
but we
Okay.
definitely do know how many beds we have.
Okay, well, that's refreshing to know that you know how many beds you have. So Ben, if we, next week, contact the Justice Center, let them take a look at this. So it's all part of Justice Reinvestment too, and if, Sheila, would you be willing to talk to the Justice Center with Ben at some
Absolutely.
point about this? So plan to come back to this either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending upon, not next week, but the week after.
And specifically about CSG's involvement, is it about them having a role in the report or
No,
maybe a
no,
way of
just
refining the data
Operating
points?
response, and no, unless we were to pay them, I don't think we could ask them to have a role in it, but although I'm sure they're willing to help us to develop this legislation and go over the results.
So essentially just have them,
Look at the 3 drafts, what's their thoughts, maybe if you and Sheila can, and I'd be happy to join you at some point on that.
Absolutely.
Maybe Ellen or somebody be willing to join us on this for the 28th of the 1st.
okay.
Okay. I noticed we have Terry Chen here online. Terry and all. We haven't heard from the DCF folks yet, so I don't know what you want to do. And we're happy to hear from you.
I'd be happy to follow them. I mean, I think they're here for a purpose to speak to the committee, and I think they have very important things to say. So I'm happy to comment afterwards.
Is Commissioner Dumble here?
He'll be on at 11, sir.
11, okay. Steve, do you have somebody here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Tracy Casanova and Renee Hamill from DCF. Family Services.
Okay, they could be brief. Go ahead, please, Tracy. And
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Casanova from DCF Family Services. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. I'm here with my colleague, Renee Hamel. I just want to say I'm very appreciative for this time to come in and meet with you guys today. I have been working for the Division of Family Services for the last 20 years. 13 of those years I spent working out of the St. Albans District Office in a variety of roles as an investigator, a juvenile services worker, and a child protection worker. Over the last 6.5 years, I've been working out of our central office as our deputy compact administrator for our interstate programs, and I'm the human trafficking consultant for the division. Currently, I'm the chair of the Labor Management Committee and have been in that role since about 2014, 2015. I'm going to let Renee introduce herself to you guys.
Perfect. Good morning. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. Like Tracy said, my name is Renee Hamel. I've worked for DCF Family Services in some capacity for about 17 years. For the first few years of that employment, I was contracted to DCF as a therapeutic case manager to support youth that were in DCF custody. And then I took a full-time position with DCF Family Services as an investigator. I also held juvenile justice cases, court-involved cases. And 4 years ago, I transitioned to Central Intake and Emergency Services as a supervisor.
So today we're here to talk to you about DCF's high-end system of care that's in a state of emergency and in desperate need of a response. It has been over 2 years since the closure of Woodside and 3 years since the beginning of COVID. Both events have had an immense impact on our system of care. In that time, the need for mental health beds, crisis and stabilization beds, residential beds, and detention beds has continued to grow, and the capacity in programs has only gone down. As you are likely aware, the media continues to highlight the growing number of incidences of gun violence within our communities, which we have seen impact our work with families and the safety of our staff working in the field. In order to meet the needs of Vermont's most vulnerable children, all parts of our system of care need to be functioning. We need facilities with staff that can meet the needs of children who have a history of trauma, of violence towards themselves or others, unmet mental health needs, substance abuse, and those whose needs exceed the foster care system. When children in DCF custody whose needs can no longer be met in the community and there are no available staff secure placements, DCF Family Services employees have been charged with staffing these children at a variety of locations, sometimes with law enforcement presence, sometimes with only FSD staff. In the last 2 years, the high-end system of care has fallen on the backs of Family Service Division employees who are putting themselves at risk of harm in order to meet this need. The majority of Family Services employees who are providing this service are part of a high-end system of care team, a team of which I am a part of. However, when these staff are unable to cover the duration of the staffings, the request goes out to volunteers. And if no one is able to cover that need, then that request goes out to the on-call worker, who is then required to go out and provide that staffing. These staffings are occurring on average about once a week. This is on top of their normal job responsibilities. Many of these staffings occur for over a 24-hour period of time, and staff have to remain awake overnight after working their prior shift. The staffings also include long travel times, since the majority of our locations that we can provide these staffings are about a 3-hour commute. So some of the locations that we're using are in Bennington and Brattleboro. So for example, when I volunteer to go to a staffing, I'm going to be going to most likely to Brattleboro or Bennington, and I live in Chittenden County. So that's 6 hours of driving that does not include the actual staffing of that child. In the last year, there have been times where Family Services staff have been asked to staff multiple children at separate locations at the same night. Family Services is being expected to create pop-up residential programs with their staff despite not having the training to be residential staff. This increased workload has increased staff burnout and exhausted staffing resources. In the last 2 years, Vermont has lost half of their available high-end beds, despite DCF increasing fundings to these programs. This only resulted in programs being able to stay open versus resuming their pre-COVID capacity levels or increasing capacity. This has increased the need for FSD staffing on top of the children at emergency departments, police stations, hospitals, Yellow House, Horizons, Rest Stop, Mountainside, district offices, and correctional facilities. In June of 2020, the Vermont Digger reported that 4 juveniles had been held in adult jails because there was no juvenile facility to place them in Vermont. Kids should not have to be placed in an adult correctional facility because there is no secure, safe alternative for juveniles here in the state of Vermont. In the last year, there have been 63 instances where FSD staff were called in to staff kids. Some of these youth FSD staff should not have been providing staffing as it compromised their personal safety based on the level of aggression those youth were demonstrating. Just because a child is in DCF custody does not mean the FSD staff should be expected to staff them when they present a danger to others. Not only is this dangerous for our staff, it is also dangerous and a setup for these kids. Just 2 weeks ago, I was asked if I would be willing to staff a youth and was warned of the likelihood that this youth might try to assault me. Despite the clear recommendation from our staff safety manager that we should not be staffing this child due to the risk they pose to our staff, staffing was still requested because we had no other options within our system of care. While we have exceptionally skilled staff at Family Services, we are child protection and juvenile services workers. We are not residential and detention staff. When Family Services Division employees are tasked with staffing these children, we are responsible for feeding them, providing them with their medications, making sure they are safe, making sure they don't have access to anything that could hurt themselves or us, and do our best at maintaining safety as the only expectation. Since we are not residential staff, our staff are not assessing situations from that lens. And with multiple staff changing over, those expectations can change, making it more difficult for children to maintain. All of these continued pressures.
Can you wrap up, please? I allocated, we tried to fit you in this morning. and I need to move on to other witnesses.
Yes, I have, like, can I have 2 more minutes?
2 more minutes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, is all I have right now.
Okay. So I have this written testimony that I can also turn in. So I guess in summary, that we are really concerned that if there's not an immediate solution to this problem, we need change now, and we need a solution now. Our department and our workers, we can't wait for a solution that's going to come a year down the road. We have been working in this problem for the last 3 years, and our staff have already been hurt within this time when they've been expected to staff kids who are dangerous. So we are asking all of our leaders to please help us, because we cannot do this. We cannot solve this problem alone. So I'm going to turn this over to Renee, and she's going to give you some details around some of these staffings that I think is important for you guys to have.
Again, I'm sorry that, I asked. Trying to fit people in only makes me the bad guy. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try to make it brief and just hit some highlights here.
I'm honestly going to say we'll come back to this at a later date and invite you back next Friday to continue the conversation. I want to hear from the commissioner. I think the committee understands the problem. The problem is I don't have a solution. The programs in Bennington that I'm uniquely aware of have about half the staff they had before. So obviously they can't take that many kids that they had pre-COVID. And the agency has its problems too. And the fact that we don't have the beds. I'll invite you back next Friday along with Steve Howard. Continue the conversation if we could. I want to give Dr. Chen an opportunity to talk. Thank you for understanding.
So, okay for me to go, Senator Sears? Yeah,
Yes,
so
please.
thank you. For the record, Harry Chen, Interim Commissioner, Department for Children and Families. And I really would want to start out with profound appreciation and gratitude for the people like Tracy and Renee who are doing this work under conditions similar to exactly like what they told you. And so what I would start off to say is thank them for highlighting these challenges, because they and the department really see these as very important issues that we need to try to solve, and that we have been actively trying to solve, but really defy easy solutions, as you so indicated, Senator Sears. I will acknowledge that there are staffings of high needs children and youth by family service workers that have some potential risks to them. I will not disagree with that. But the challenge is that behind every one of those staffings, and everyone here knows, and everyone at DCF knows, is a child or youth that's in crisis. And lacking the adequate facilities, and lacking being the only state without a hardware secure stabilization facility, we have to do the best we can. And sometimes sometimes that outcome is not what anybody would want. And so I'd say that we've tried in many ways to increase our staffing, both at the department level, in terms of stay interviews, in terms of exit interviews. But there's obviously a vicious cycle that we're seeing here, which is low staffing, more people being asked to do things that are outside of their job description, and getting burned out, less staffing, and I think you can follow that story on. So we're working to improve our hiring. We're actually focused on a certain few districts that seem to have the lowest either acceptance rates or retention rates. with whether it be bonuses, whether it be state bonuses, whether it be referral bonuses. So all of those things are going on, while at the same time understanding that we have to implement a cultural change with professional development and ways for people to feel more involved in the solution. I'd say in terms of the high-end system of care, we're talking about 10% of the 1,091 children and youth in DCF custody, but they are challenged. I mean, functioning without a secure facility is like running a hospital without an ICU. And what happens there is individuals are being forced to being taken care of in a situation where the people aren't trained, the individuals aren't trained or capable of providing the best care. And those have downhill effects in terms of a logjam. People can't come up the ladder, people can't go down the ladder. So that is clearly one of the issues. And we spend a lot of time, somebody mentioned trying to find out-of-state placements. One individual took 58 calls to try to find placement out of state. And so we do this routinely with these, with the youth under question. We also understand that two things we understand. One is that we need to provide relief for the staff that are doing these staffings. And so in our budget, BAA and 24 budget, our money for hiring contract individuals who are trained as residential workers to actually provide these staffings. In addition, you know that we're trying to build facilities, we're trying to improve the facilities and spaces necessary to provide the best care that we can in the absence of a secure facility to provide staff secure care for these individuals. We've also increased the pay for staff who are partaking in this after hours and trying to assess whether we can have a collaboration among the AHS to form people who are volunteer to provide this care under these situations, and B, specially trained to do so, and paid kind of a bonus for participating. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do. And as you know, Senator Shiz, we're doing our best to support the partners that we really depend on to provide the beds. And it's not a week goes by that I don't spend some time with one partner organization or another talking about, can we help them with traveling staff? Can we help them with premium staffing dollars that would help them to fill their staffing rosters, but also provide us more capacity? Because in the end, it's the lack of capacity related to the pandemic, related to the overall staffing challenges that we see throughout our state government, healthcare, and obviously children's services. So in summary, I can say nothing but appreciation and gratitude for the work of the family service workers that are providing this. It's a challenging balance to balance the needs of our children and youth and the needs of our staff. We are doing our best to both locate facilities where we can transport individuals, children and youth out of states. We have a prong to actually try to obviously build facilities that in the next year we're hopeful. And then finally, the staffing, immediate staffing needs with a contract soon, hopefully soon to be secured. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and I wish you well in your next adventure. It's always a pleasure to have you here, Harry. As a former colleague, we do all wish you well as you head to Uganda.
Thank you.
I wonder if somebody could come back next Friday with a timeline for a secure facility. I think what you just said about running DCF without a secure facility is like running a hospital without an ICU. I think that's what you said. I would like to see a schedule for when we might have a secure facility. I know you're working hard with partners in the communities to try to provide, but if there's any way that we can help push this forward, it's the key to me. And I know there's a discussion about St. Albans and other places, maybe Shyla or somebody from AHS can come next Friday and give us some hope for a date when we might have a secure facility.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now, unless there's questions for Dr. Chen. I turn it over to Commissioner Demmel, the Department of Corrections, which does have a high-end facility.
Yes, we do. Hey, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is Nick Demmel, Commissioner of the Department of Corrections. Apologize for not being in person today, but we had a pre-scheduled visit to St. Albans and Burlington Probation and Parole. So you're getting to see one of our beautiful conference rooms in St. Albans. And with the ice skates, managed to make it up here pretty safely this morning.
Senator Norris has to make it up there later on today, so.
Yeah, and it's not getting any better, let me tell you. It's wild up here at the moment, weather-wise. I will try to keep my comments fairly brief to be respectful of the schedule. But I think you heard earlier this week from DOC line staff, both from the facilities and from the field, who I think did a wonderful job of highlighting the pain and pressures that they're feeling on a daily basis as a result of our staffing challenges and really as we recover from the impacts of the pandemic. And I think we could replicate those stories over and over again with staff from around the state. That their views are reflected throughout. And I'd reiterate Commissioner Chen's comments that, we're just deeply appreciative of the work that our staff put in on a daily basis, often against long odds and tough situations with long hours. And the department itself is really focused on committing itself to fixing these really systemic challenges within our system, to fix what is years-long staffing crisis at this point. And we did that by really starting to dig in on the pain points that staff were telling us about. We heard often that pay wasn't commensurate with the work they were putting in. We heard often, I think the most frequent thing that I heard from staff is they simply do not have enough time away from our facilities and our field offices to spend time with their families, to do hobbies, to get time for rest and recuperation. And we know that these are difficult jobs to work in physically, mentally, emotionally, and we weren't giving staff enough time away to regroup and just decompress. We know that from staff, they identified that we had communication pain points and that we weren't engaging with them and they didn't feel engaged in our decision-making processes. We know that they were highly concerned about wellness. And so we started with these pain points as a way to identify, we know we're losing staff. We know we were having a hard time recruiting staff. What are the things that are either preventing people from coming into the system or driving people out of the system? And we started there. And so that led us to create a stability and sustainability plan that we launched last fall after reaching agreement with BSEA on a number of those provisions. It included pay enhancements above the state contract with BSEA. Over 2 years, that will come out to be about $11 million. Whether that's the exact right amount, we're not sure yet. I think one way to think about where we are in addressing our staffing challenges is that we're just at the end of the very beginning. And we've tried some solutions, we've seen some data, some results, and now we're recalibrating and trying to figure out what are the best ways that we can target this problem. But we provided very targeted pay enhancements to security staff working in our facilities, to our field staff working on standby or working in the support shifts like at the hospitals or when they were working in our facilities. We provided recruitment and retention bonuses, referral bonuses that were targeted at our recruitment and retention efforts. And that total package was negotiated and agreed to with our labor partners. And we'll, I think, reapproach that here in the coming month or so. But it gives us a great opportunity to really provide targeted enhancements to support our staff. We also sat down and really started from scratch, designing a schedule and a staffing model that we think would greatly improve the situation for our staff in our facilities in particular. That schedule, we moved from 8-hour shifts to 12-hour shifts. At 4 of our 6 facilities, it's on our, what we view as a more ideal schedule that provides staff 7 days off in a 14-day pay period. So staff are working 7 days, 12-hour shifts, staff have 7 days off. Pretty universally, as I go around the facilities and talk to staff about these schedules, there's a real resonance around the benefits and the amount of time people are getting away from the facilities. We're not at a staffing level that these schedules work perfectly, and I want to be very clear about that. Folks are still working extraordinarily long hours. Some facilities are still on the 5 days a week of 12-hour shifts, so a 60-hour schedule. Many of our facilities still do have 16-hour shifts. We ideally fill that extra time with volunteers, but there is mandatory overtime as well. But as we see our recruiting trends move in a positive direction, we're seeing those schedules fill in and get closer to an ideal state where we really do have staff working 50% of the days in a calendar year. And I think that's ideal because it does really give that recuperation time, that time with family, time with friends, doing hobbies, getting time just away from the prison environment. We're also working very diligently to improve the way we engage with staff. We've done significantly more staff surveys to understand their satisfaction levels. We've worked hard to communicate better and through different means. And we're spending a lot more time out in our facilities, in our field offices, just talking to line staff. That's part of the reason I'm up here at St. Albans today. We also recognize, as I've said many times in front of this committee and others, that a career in corrections isn't simply a job, but a lifestyle, and it has lifestyle impacts. And so we need to wrap around our staff as many staff wellness, emotional, and mental health supports that we can. Really, in addition to the stuff that they do inside our facilities, we need to make sure we're supporting their whole life. And we're exploring different ways to draw wellness resources into our system. We've increased the number of mental health practitioners, licensed psychologists that we provide to our staff as a resource. And we're looking for partnerships with national groups that focus specifically on correctional officer wellness. And I think we're making some good strides in that area, but certainly that remains a growth area for us. We also have retooled the way we recruit and are now focusing heavily on retention. Our recruitment efforts have been paying pretty good dividends lately. So in July, we had a 30% vacancy rate amongst our security staff. As of this morning, that number is under 25%. So we're making progress on the recruitment side. It's not quick progress, and we're certainly not at the numbers we want to be, but I think the way we redesigned our recruitment efforts has really shown pretty good results. And we're working now to really understand the retention challenges we're facing and create solutions to make sure that we're retaining as many staff as possible. One other thing I just wanted to put out there is, the other thing that we studied is really the future of the workforce. And you look at national workforce data and Vermont workforce data, and the pool of available people who is going to be available to do these jobs starting today, but 5 years out, 10 years out, is shrinking rapidly. And so we need to reimagine the way that we do corrections in the state to make sure that we can provide the services the state wants with the workforce that's available to us. And that's something that we're working with national partners on to study and design solutions that will meet the needs of Vermont in the future. I think it's also, worth highlighting that this is not a corrections only problem. This is a state workforce problem. And we see this with our law enforcement partners at the Vermont State Police. We see it, as you just heard, with DCF and other state partners. We also see it in private sector industries that are suffering from staffing challenges. And so we tried to create the widest angle lens, the most comprehensive information to work with, in which we design our solutions and try to serve our staff. With that, I will pause and answer any questions. And certainly we'd be happy to share any of the data or information that we're using to help make decisions on this front.
I don't know if there's any questions, Commissioner. I did make a comment that what we heard earlier this week versus what you're hearing now is somewhat different. And that the conditions, the pressure of short-staffed is still with us. And I recognize all the things that you just outlined that are very positive. And I wonder how we reconcile that with what we heard.
Yeah.
Line staff on, I can't even remember what day it was.
No, that's a very good question, Senator, and I appreciate you asking. I mean, I think those things are true at the same time, unfortunately. I think what you heard from staff is exactly right. They are deep in the pressure, in the pain of the moment. I think about this a little bit like we're hoping to run a mile. So far, we've made it 1 inch. That doesn't, we are making progress, but it doesn't feel that way because we're in the pain right now. And I see that every day in every facility, in all of our field offices. And so I don't want you to think that we have rose-colored glasses on here or that we think everything is great. It's not. It is absolutely not. We simply are starting to make progress on some of these key objectives. And we hope that with time and with a lot of energy and effort put into this effort, we'll actually make substantial changes that staff will begin to feel on a daily basis. And I would also just highlight, it's unfortunate, but the success is not felt uniformly across the state. Some facilities are doing quite well, and we can highlight those to you. Some are doing not very well, and we can highlight that to you. And the field offices, I think in particular, when we talk about the standby issue, the field offices are impacted differently depending on where they are. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And so we want to create both local and kind of global solutions to target this so that we get relief everywhere. And we want it to be felt evenly. It's not currently, just based on the way our system is structured.
Thank you. It's helpful, actually. I don't envy you or Commissioner Chen in this particular environment. Both have huge challenges.
I think you could be a little envious of Commissioner Chen because he's about to sail off into the sunset, but
I should have said Commissioner Winters.
Right.
I figured I'd let him get settled into the job before but I hope you'll continue to work on these issues. And I don't know what the solution is, but I'm glad there's at least a plan in place for corrections. And I'm glad there's a plan in place for DCF, but the plan is particularly for the high-end population needs to be sooner rather than later. And I don't know how to rush that plan up in government speak, but there needs to be as quickly as possible. We need to replace the high end, and whether it's in St. Albans or Windsor or wherever, it needs to happen.
Yeah, and as much as the department can assist in that effort, I think that we are, and we have a great partnership with DCF, and certainly we'll support them however we can on that front. And just to highlight, I mean, the staffing issue for the Department of Corrections is our #1 issue. It's the thing that we are focused on the most, that we're dedicating the most resources and time to, because if we can't get this right, we don't get to do any of the other things that we want to do. We can't execute policy effectively if we don't have the staff. And so this is our #1 priority in trying to resolve this or make the situation better.